And we are live. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. Thank you all, viewers, for watching this video today. We're going to be talking about coaching, but in particular, how you can become a better coach, mentor, leader at work. Specifically, if you are looking to get promoted and climb up that career ladder. So there's no better person to ask and talk to about this other than Chris March right here, who is a certified, fill me in, Chris, what are you again now? I know you have a fancy title behind your name. Tell me about what is that title? What does it mean? And how does that make you a pro at this stuff?
Firstly, thank you, Roger, for the introduction and for having me today. So just this past weekend, I became a associated certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. There's certain eligibility requirements that are required. The ICF is considered the gold standard of coaching. So I'm at the ACC level, then there's the PCC, and then the MCC, which I'm working towards. At the ACC level, you have to hit a minimum of 60 hours of education, 100 hours of paid coaching. You also need to do 3-month mentor, and then you sit an exam, which is over 3 hours as well. So it is a lot of investment in time into it as well. So I'm grateful. It certainly is an empowering experience and just also validates you as a coach. And when you look to work with people, certainly they're always looking for people who are accredited. I know with organizations, that is a common question that comes up as well. Are you accredited by a body, with the ICF and the ACC being the two main bodies when it comes to coaching?
That's awesome. Wow. So glad you took the time to join us here today, because honestly, we're going to be talking to a bunch of folks here that do not have the credentials that you have. So really what we want to focus on is, how can they still be coach-like at work and still, provide value to their teams, to their colleagues, those in their organization. So let me just start off with this low softball. Like, what are some of the key skills that are required to be a good coach?
I think the most important one is active listening. You need to be able to listen to what people are telling you. Really, really simple. In the world that we live in today, an overload of information, distractions from our phones to our laptops. If you can just start by sitting down and truly listening to people with the intent to understand, not reply, is a huge, huge start. Just do that. Really test yourself. Next conversation, one-on-one, just listen. Try to spend 90% of the time in your next conversation listening. And throughout the conversation, you can paraphrase certain things by saying, I heard you say this. Is that correct? And just making sure that you have the verbal cues as well. Like right now I'm nodding, making sure that you're engaged and really listening. And that is one of the most powerful things that you can offer people, is the power of your attention.
It's such good advice. And, it takes focus. It takes energy to be an active listener.
Yes.
And, your points around eliminating distractions and being focused is incredibly important, right? If I'm hearing you correctly, because of all these distractions that we have. So right now, for example, in this conversation, I am locked in because we're obviously being recorded, but at the same time, I have my email closed, my phone is on silent, and, I try to be here now so that we can have an engaging conversation for the group. So does that mean that, like, if I'm at work, for example, and let's say I'm doing a virtual call with someone in a conversation like we are here today, what are some other things that we can do as a coach to create a coach-like environment to ensure that we are focused? Is there anything specific that you've learned works really well in this type of setting?
I think it's also important, depending on the situation, if you can have an agenda before you have a conversation. It's always good to really set the stage, making sure that you have some parameters or guidelines around what the conversation is going to be as well. I think if you're going to have a meeting, you need to ensure that you have a set agenda. Otherwise, what is the purpose? Right. And the key thing about this as well as a leader is having that mental shift is, when you move into leadership, it's no longer about yourself. You're about growing other people. And that's the power of coaching when it comes to that. So really being in that mindset, you're not trying to get your point across. And I'm guilty of this. I remember myself when I first moved into leadership many years ago, that I was trying to be the person that had all the answers. When you don't, leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about slowing down and truly listening to what people have to tell you. And they will give you where the conversation would go if you're asking the right questions. So having the right mindset, also making sure that you as the other person on the end of the conversation are in a right mindset as well, not being frantic, slowing down. If you know you're going to be walking into a conversation, typically I'll use myself as an example. If I'm going to have a one-on-one, I really want to be clear on what the conversation is going to be about, slow down, sometimes meditate, sometimes otherwise not, and just be really calm and focused on that time and block out that specific time. If you know the meeting is going to go for 10, 15 minutes, and just focus on that other person and give them the space. That is what it's about, giving people the time and the space to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all those tips are fantastic. I particularly like you mentioned that thing of, meditation, right? Getting yourself prepared for that conversation, making sure you're in the right space. But really, what really resonated with me is that shift in mindset when you're a manager leader, that your job is to help others, and then it's not about you. It's you helping that individual where they need the help. And your job, it sounds like, is to guide them in that direction. You may not have all the answers, but you can certainly provide support. So let's think about this for a second. I mean, do you find, or in your experience, have you found that those who are good coaches have a higher chance of moving up the kind of corporate career ladder, or is it not a necessary requirement? I mean, what do you think about that when I make that comment?
I think the leadership coaching style is the most important style as we move into the future. I think this push and pull leadership style, autocratic, you hear all these different leadership styles. Of course, you need to adapt to the style in front of you. However, the best leaders that I've worked with are also great coaches, or they have those coach-like tendencies where they're a little bit further ahead of you, but also close enough to push you to really set you on that path to excellence. So they will give you some of the answers, but help you discover that yourself as well through your own autonomy. So I think that is really key for anyone who's trying to get ahead, is having some coach-like mindsets when it comes to coaching themselves, and to also coach the people that they're working with as well. It will help you advance.
All right. I'm going to throw you on the spot here, Chris, because you're an accredited professional. I'm still learning this game. I've been a coach as well for a long time, but I do not hold the credentials in this area like you do. So if you were coaching me, let's say I was a first-time manager, and I've come to you, and obviously we're going to have to do this quickly, but I've come to you saying, listen, Chris, I've got a team of 10 people. There's 3 in particular that I'm struggling to connect with. What can I do differently to connect with them? I hear that maybe I should be a better coach, or maybe I should adopt a coaching style. Like, I don't know. Like, what should I do, Chris? Like, how do you help? Any advice? Yeah.
So the first question I would be asking you around, Roger, tell me what you've tried so far.
Good question. Good question. I've tried kind of these one-on-one meetings, where we'll sit down and talk about their problems and issues at work. I pretty much know how to solve them all. So I just really tell them what to do and teach them, and then let them go. I mean, I find that has worked in the past. Does that work?
What do you think?
I mean, I think for the others it works really well, but for this person, I'm not so sure. Maybe that's why I'm asking you the question, I guess.
Have you spoken with these 3 separate people you mentioned?
So we're going to pause here. We can see it already, right? Like what Chris is doing, phenomenal, is continuing to ask questions, right? Because you're trying to get to the root cause. So why don't you talk to the the audience here, like what you were doing with me, obviously in that little mock on the spot scenario, just to get going. Like, what were you doing?
So I was probing you to really raise awareness around where the root of the problem is, to your point, right? So instead of giving you the answers, I really probed you to ask you where you're at, what are the solutions you already tried, and where any pre-assumptions may be as well. So helping you to firstly have awareness and then build that bridge from there to hopefully set some action items from there, depending on where we got to, of course.
Of course. That was like a 30-second snippet. And so, what I wanted to share in that little mock scenario on the spot is I think most new managers got to the position that they got to because of their technical abilities and skills, right? They were high performers, and it was like, what better person than a high performer to create other high performers? Let's move them up the ladder. But what can happen, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that because we already know the answer to perhaps solve their problem, we solve it for them.
It's
right?
a huge thing, right? And it took hours and hours of practice for me to get to this space. And for anyone that's watching this, naturally as human beings, we innately want to give a response. We're programmed that way to naturally always want to share our opinions. And it takes a lot of practice to be able to slow down, just listen, don't respond, truly listen, and not wait to respond. It's just such a powerful skill, and will really help you to truly understand what people are trying to tell you. If you ask the right questions again, you will get clarity of what the challenges they're facing depending on the conversation.
Awesome. I'm going to do this here. Listen and probe. Watch this. Listen and probe. Let's remember to do that, right? It's one way to be more coach-like. That's great. All right, let's change gears for a second here. So what if I just don't believe that I'm a good coach? Like, how do I become truly? And we've talked about active listening and things like that, but that's hard. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it. Like, what are some things that I or those watching who really want to be a better coach, like, what can they do to really work on themselves to be more coach-like? Any advice there?
I would start with a great resource. It's a book called The Coaching Habits by Michael Bung-Ray Stainer. It is a fantastic resource. It is a great read, really digestible. I think I read it within less than a month, and it's really focused around being more coach-like without being a coach. And it's centered around 7 questions for you to have. And that's it. I can't name off all the 7, to be fair, but I remember most of them. The first one is, what's on your mind? If you start every conversation with that, what's on your mind? Huge, right? That's
absolutely.
That throws a lob directly up to you, Roger. One of my favorite questions as well, hearing that, is, what's the most important thing you and I should be discussing today? Very similar to the previous question. And the book has more of those great questions. One of the other questions that I distinctly remember is, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to?
Oh, that's a good one. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Because time is a finite resource. Yes. And when we do one thing, it means we're not doing another. Oh, that's great. So when you're asking that question of somebody and they are attempting to answer it, that would really make them think. And no one's really going to prep for that, I'm guessing, either, right? You're going to catch them on the spot.
No, 100%. And I think those are the type of questions that can really get the wheels turning when you're having those type of conversation as well. And I think sometimes another little tip with becoming more coach-like is, sometimes the best question is silence. Because naturally, when you think about your thought process, is when you answer something, you may have an initial thought, and then you pause, and then you have a follow-up. And naturally, we want to jump right into that.
Yeah.
Try as a practice to give give someone that space, 5 to 10 seconds after they've shared their initial thought, I guarantee you most times you're going to get a follow-up thought as well, because they're just thinking about that first question over and over again that you've shared with them as well. So silence is also a great question.
Oh, I love that. Man, we could talk all day. I mean, I don't want to quiz you to see if you know all 7. You admitted that you don't remember them all, but that advice to, read that book called The Coaching Habits, I believe that's the title.
Correct. Yes.
Is a phenomenal one. That's great. So, okay. Can we talk about career growth a little bit? Because I understand we've spoken before. We've gotten to know each other over the past little while, that you've had a successful career, right?
Yes.
What would you attribute to your ability to kind of move up the career ladder in your life? What were some of those things, those attributes, those skills, that you displayed that allow you to be so successful? What do you think those would be? What comes to mind?
I think a couple of things. Firstly, I've always been hugely into personal growth. Growing up, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. Kobe Bryant is one of my idols, and I was obsessed with becoming the best basketball player. I wanted to go pro. Obviously, I didn't make it, or we'd be having a different conversation here. But I took that hard work mindset, the teamwork, the perseverance, putting in the reps, and really took that into the corporate world. And from there, I wasn't a great student coming out of school, but I knew that I could, if I put my mind to something, then I'd be really, really good at it. So anytime I had the opportunity to learn, I did. I put my hand up for different courses, and I just tried to treat people the way I want to treat myself. I know it's such simple and cliche advice in a lot of ways. However, I think it's so important because people are going to remember how you make them feel. And when it comes to being easy to work with, being relatable, being punctual, all those things that don't show up, just doing those little things and being good to people is such a great skill to have. And I think that's really helped me. And I think just putting your hand up to do certain things when you weren't ready to do so as well, really challenging myself. I've applied for many different roles where I didn't get them, and I didn't let that stop me from continuing to grow. And I remember applying for my first serious type senior leadership role 3 times, didn't get the role. Tough. And that was really tough for my ego. We all have an ego. However, I really just tried to push myself and learn from myself as well. So it's really a number of different factors, I would say, that's really led to my success. It's just having that internal drive has really helped me get to where I am today. Yeah,
I mean, first and foremost, this would have been a very different conversation if you were a professional ball player. That would have been a really cool one. Although you probably wouldn't be here, so let's get real. That idea of kind of perseverance, I think, is a really strong one. Everything you said resonated, but the ability to try and come back again and again and again is something that some people have, others tend to struggle with, right? They don't want to be rejected.
Yes.
They don't want to be seen as a failure, perhaps, whatever other feelings are associated with that. But, when you're from what I understand what you're saying, when you're in an organization in particular, there might be that perfect role that you're applying for and you don't get it.
Yes.
Like, that's the reality of it, right? And it's not necessarily to take things personally, that you failed, but as motivation to do other things. And from, you said personal development is one of the main things that's really allowed you to excel. And so now that you say personal development, we have to bring up the topic du jour, right? Which is artificial intelligence. Oh yeah, I know. You may not be a techie AI guy. I don't know. I'm going to find out in a minute. But do you think that AI could ever replace the role of a coach?
It's a great question, firstly. And I think it's a great collaboration partner. Firstly, I think it helps you with content ideation. both of us, we share content regularly, and I think it's great to really prompt those certain ideas, really test your thinking in a lot of ways as well. AI can certainly do that for sure. And I think you can prompt it if you have a basic understanding of prompting, or you can get someone to help you with that. There's certainly some value in AI giving coaching, but the one thing that AI will never have is emotional intelligence and critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So it can give you some generic answers. And for anyone that does AI and prompting, you can see that it can get generic. It can also hallucinate in a lot of different ways as well. So there's certainly gaps. Who knows what the future will hold? However, I don't think at the end of the day, being human, that human connection is what we really yearn for. And I think we learned this and was impacted a lot through the pandemic. I don't think you can take that away. I think it will have an impact for sure. But let's see.
No, it's a great point. Absolutely. I mean, I am what would we call myself? I like to think that I'm into new tech, but I think I do that just because I'm curious. I'm always wanting to learn, but I recognize that things are going so quickly. It's literally impossible to keep up. And your point around emotional intelligence is spot on, right? So first of all, you brought it up. Like, what in the world is emotional intelligence? People say this all the time. They're like, EQ is better than IQ and EI and all this stuff. Like you raise the term. Like, how do you kind of define emotional intelligence in your own words, not some fancy definition from a textbook?
Emotional intelligence is being able to recognize your own emotions and how you utilize them in different scenarios, either personally or professionally. I think is a huge component of emotional intelligence. And when you're in those tricky situations, under pressure at work or a hard conversation, how do you naturally react? What's your innate behavior? Some of those things are learned behaviors. And I think that's the advantage as you become older and wiser. You can certainly develop that as well. However, I think it's just down to understanding awareness, emotions, and how you regulate them depending on the scenario.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, I guess it goes without saying that those who are effective coaches likely have high EQ, high EI, or EQ. I always go between the two. High EQ. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yes, I would say that's fair. Again, you've worked with a lot of great leaders. I'm sure you would agree. Great leaders have high EQ, EI, whichever verbiage you want to use. I think it's just so important to be able to flex that and continue to develop that EQ over time.
Absolutely. And you did say this, right? I mean, in your definition, your overview of it, that it really starts with yourself, right? Knowing your own emotions. And that, if we circle back to kind of the role of a coach and being coach-like, is you need to be in that correct mindset, is what you're saying, right? So perhaps that's the best advice we can give. Maybe not the best, but a good piece of advice we can give is know yourself, right? And if you want to be more coach-like, one way to start is check out that book called The Coaching Habits. Get the 7 questions, give it a whirl, use pauses or silence as an ally, and just continue to know that you're there to help others, right? Those in your team, those in your charge. That's not about you, putting your ego aside. So I'm going to throw out some of the snippets from our chat today, and then we're going to close it off. So listen and probe, right?
Yes.
The book, Coaching Habits, which had
fantastic book.
And I guess you could use ChatGPT and get those 7 questions pretty quickly, but better to buy the book and read it, right?
Yes. I think it's $15 from memory. Yeah. I guarantee you, if you read that, you will pick up a lot of value and will help you to be more coach-like.
Yeah. And one of the questions you said was, what's on your mind, which is an awesome opener. Yes. That is so cool. I really like that. And you talked about the best question is silence.
Yes.
And a key to growth or being successful, in your career or one's career is around professional development. So we have to remember that. And at the end of the day, let's be good to people, right?
Be kind.
Sorry?
Be kind.
Exactly. All right. So I'm going to close it down here with a big one. All right. Scenario, right? This audience mostly are kind of mid-career professionals. Perhaps they have other commitments at home, whether they have family and kids, but there's lots of things pulling at them. What's your take on this idea of it's perhaps selfish to take time out for yourself to do things you enjoy?
What a great question. Firstly, I think it's so important. We've heard a bit of a theme throughout here, the self part. When we're talking about leadership, you have to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others. And this is a follow-up to this question as well. You need to be the best version of yourself to turn up for others as well.
Right.
So you can never fill from an empty cup. So you need to find joy in what you do outside of work, whatever it may be. For me, I enjoy watching sports, going to the gym, reading, writing, whatever that may be. That ensures that I have the balance. And I hear that word a lot, work-life balance. I think it's about a harmony. You need to have a harmony between work and life and ensure that both of them work together. And one is not overlapping each other, to ensure that you turn up and become the best version of yourself every single day. Because as a leader, that's what you are paid to do. Leadership is a privilege, and the world would be in a much better place if we had leaders who were more effective, more disciplined, and were empowering their people.
Awesome, man. Oh my goodness. All right. Where can everybody find you? I put up your LinkedIn here. Christopher March on LinkedIn. You can find you. Anywhere else they can find you? Anything else, that you want to share about yourself? I know you have a newsletter. What else? Go ahead. No. You can self-promote now. You have the floor.
Thank you, Roger. You can check me out on LinkedIn. I share leadership insights 4 to 5 times a week. That's where I post most of my content. I also have a newsletter called The Leading Edge, which is targeted for leaders. It's all about giving one practical tip each Sunday to help you become a better leader. So check that out. I know Roger will tag all the details here as well. Hope you found the conversation helpful. If I could do anything to support, please reach out on LinkedIn. My DMs are always open.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much. As I punch my microphone.
He's that excited. I like it.
Of your day, and I appreciate your time. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.